Hey guys, it's Rose, and as you can see, I am surrounded by stacks and stacks and stacks of books, which is kind of a bookworm's natural habitat. I'm really liking it, but the reason that I've done it is because I want to talk about why it's not always a bad thing to have a really enormous TBR pile. Now, quite a few of these are actually part of my TBR pile. I counted the other day, I have at least 54 books in my TBR pile, and I say at least because those are the books I've actually bought, acquired, had, that I have wanted to read. There is also a whole chunk of books, probably another 30 or 40, that came with my husband when we moved in together that I haven't read yet. They're his, and they're kind of a separate TBR pile. So in total, we're talking about like 100 books. That's a lot. And I know a lot of people are working really hard to get rid of their TBR pile, 0 by 2016. And if you want to do that, you know what? That's awesome, because there is definitely a little glorious moment of satisfaction when you finish all of your TBR pile. It's like ticking it all off the list, and you get this like lovely glow. So I totally understand the desire to do that, and I also know how frustrating it can be to pick up a book that you think is going to be really exciting or really interesting, and then realize it's 6 months or a year or 4 years down the line, you still haven't picked it up because it has just become lost in the mists of the TBR pile, and you don't know what you're going to do with it. So I get that, but a lot of the time it feels like people really put down having a huge TBR pile, and in a weird way, for some reason, people always say things like, well, I'm not going to buy any more books until I finish the ones I have. It's like finishing your vegetables before you can have dessert as a kid, ignoring the fact that now that we're grown-ups, we can have cupcakes for breakfast if you want. It's kind of gross, and as a grown-up, you know that. But totally off topic. And obviously, people talk about things like their partner or their parent or their roommate asking them, like, why are you buying more books? You already have these ones that you haven't read. But there's a lot of really awesome reasons to keep a huge stack of books that you haven't read. And here are some of them. Number one is that you are never going to be stuck without something to read. I hear a lot of people talking about reading slumps and about finding it really tough and not wanting to read anything. And I honestly really never have that problem, even just with my own TBR pile, because it has such a massive range. I have horror, I have thrillers, I have contemporary, I have romance, I have nonfiction, I have young adult, I have classics, I have historical fiction. I have so many different books and so many different genres that at any point I guarantee I can find something that I want to read. And sometimes it takes a few. Sometimes I'm going to sit and think, I'll read this one next, and I'll pick it up and I'll flip through it a little, and I'll maybe read a few pages and go, no, put it down. And then I'll do that over and over again. And sometimes it can take me a couple of days of doing that before I pick up the one that I want, but there's always going to be something to read, and that's really, really awesome. Number two is that if you are a bookworm, you are probably a collector, and there is something really awesome about having a huge collection. But if you are a slower reader and you only bought a book, read it, put it aside, repeat, then it would take a really long time to build that collection up. And for a lot of people, there's something awesome about having a really gorgeous bookshelf, or a wall of bookshelves, or a wall of little floating shelves with stacks of books on them. It's just nice. It's really, really nice to have a house absolutely crammed full of books. At least I think it is. And most bookworms I know think that it's really nice to have bunches and bunches of books, but if you never buy a new one until you finish the ones you're already reading, especially if you're also borrowing books from friends or from the library, then you don't get that joy of the big collection. So even if I have read maybe 2/3 of the books in my house, it still looks nice, and it still gives me that nice, happy feeling of being surrounded by books. Number three is kind of like number two. It's to do with having this amazing anticipation of knowing that there are still 40 stories in your house that you have access to that are right there that you could open up and dive into at any time. It's kind of an awesome feeling. Maybe that's just me. Maybe it's just that I really love that feeling. I love looking at a whole bookshelf and going, I don't know how good this is. I don't know what that is. I don't know what these worlds are. There's so many characters that I haven't met yet. There are so many worlds that I haven't explored yet. And that, to me, is a really exciting feeling. And I like having that. And I think that sometimes you don't get that feeling from a shelf that you already have read everything on. You get a different and also really awesome feeling of like looking at a collection of old friends, but it's a different feeling, and I like having both. Number 4 is to do with finance, and every bookworm knows that books are a hella expensive hobby. They are. If you are a big reader and you want to buy all your books and you want to have these great feelings that I was just talking about with your big shelves that you have read and shelves that you haven't read and a home full of books, then it's going to cost you quite a bit of money if you buy them all new. If you're like me, then you probably buy a lot of your books secondhand or at yard sales or at library sales, and it's a really awesome way to save on the cost of reading, and at the same time, at least with the library, you're giving a little bit back to reading in the community for other people who can't afford books at all. So when that's the case, it's not like going into Barnes & Noble where you can just walk in and ask if they have the book you want, and if they don't, then you get to order it. You don't get to do that at secondhand stores. It'd be awesome, but it's not really how that works. So if you're in the secondhand store or the library or wherever and you see a book that you want, that maybe you've wanted for a while or that completes a series or that you just think looks really cool or that you've heard something about, you snatch that book up right away because the chances of it coming back are pretty slim. And if you want to read it, you're either going to have to snatch it up when you see it or you're going to have to pay 10 times as much. Seriously, I've got books for 25 cents before, just to pick it up at a bookstore, and that leads to having a lot more books than you can read. Even for me, being an absolute speed reader, I actually can't keep up with the number of awesome and interesting books that I pick up at secondhand bookstores and library sales, and so I end up with an enormous TBR pile, and all that means is that I'm getting a damn good deal on my books, and I'm okay with that. Reason 5. This one's to do with getting books for a gift. Now, again, if you're a big reader, you probably end up getting books on Christmases, Valentine's Day, anniversaries, birthdays, anytime that you get a present. Chances are that if your friends and family know that you love books, they're going to give you a book. And if you're really lucky, then they're going to hit the nail on the head and they're going to give you something that you really want to read, or they're going to give you something that's part of a series that you are reading, and that's awesome. But sometimes you end up with a book that you're very much kind of not into. Maybe you not hate it, but maybe it's just not something you would normally pick up. Maybe it's not something that you really want to read on first glance. Maybe it's a style of book that you don't normally read, like a genre or short stories versus a novel. And I personally cannot bear to just get rid of those books. I will read them eventually. There will be a day that I pick up that book and I'm going to read it. And I refuse, after someone's gone through the thought and the effort of picking out a book specifically for me that they think I like, which I hope that people do and they don't just grab the first thing on the shelves. But when they've done that, I don't want to just get rid of it without reading, because I feel like that's mean, especially if you don't know whether they're giving it to you because they thought it looked cool, or they're giving it to you because they loved it, and then they're going to want to talk to you about it. And it just seems so rude to throw it away. But sometimes that means that you have like 5 or even 10 books in your TBR pile that you're going to have to wade through, or that just don't appeal that much. You have to wait until you're in exactly the right mood, and you don't know when that's going to happen. If you are obsessed with getting the smallest TBR pile possible, then you're going to end up forcing yourself to read those books at a time that you don't want to, just for the sake of it, and that sucks. That's not fun for you, and it doesn't do justice to the poor book either. If you do not care if your TBR pile is taking up half your living room, then you will get to those books when you get to them, and you never have to feel bad about throwing something out. And one final mention, which is for zombie apocalypse purposes. If you are going to hunker down in your house during the zombie apocalypse, and the only books that you can have to tide you through for the rest of the year are either the ones you've already read or an enormous, glorious TBR pile, you're going to be a lot happier if you didn't restrict yourself to just 10 books that you haven't read yet. So those are my thoughts on why you should have an enormous TBR pile. Maybe you think they're useful thoughts. Maybe you think I'm just justifying having 100 books in my house that I haven't read. Either way, I would love to hear what you think about it, and whether you're one of those people that loves having a really teeny tiny TBR pile because it makes you feel accomplished, or whether you're someone like me that will just buy every book you can get your hands on and ends up with bookshelves full to be read. Let me know and have a great day. Bye.